Ryan, would you please give us a short bio about yourself in relation to the Center for Healing, your whys and how you did it all?
My name's Ryan. As Alex said, I'm co-founder of the Center for Healing. At the Center for Healing, we educate a lot of the general public and other practitioners, people in the space around trauma and its impacts on mental and emotional health, and obviously addictions and that as well. We were a physical center before we moved online into the education space. So we were an outpatient clinic here in Melbourne, Australia, where we were seeing clients from all different backgrounds, people with depression, anxiety, bipolar, people straight out of psych wards, addictions, alcohol, drugs, food addictions, emotional eating, just stress, people who were stressed out a lot. So we were seeing all sorts of people, and we were getting them in with our all natural approach. The backbone of what we did was help people address the underlying trauma that was going on for them, which we see as such a massive contributing factor to human suffering and the dysfunction that shows up in people's life. And I would actually call it probably the number one blind spot in healthcare when it comes to the way globally we approach healthcare. So we're very, very passionate about both treating people and now educating people around trauma. Why did I start the Center for Healing with my amazing partner, Melissa? I used to be a tradesman for 11 years, so I used to go around fixing air conditioning and heating units. I was up in roofs, on roofs. Right now in Melbourne, it is so cold at the minute, it's freezing, and I will sometimes have memories, quite grateful, that I don't have to get up, and I'd be like 7 o'clock in the morning on someone's roof trying to undo screws, and I couldn't feel my hands. So it's nice to be sitting here in a warm office talking to you. But I went through my own journey. I struggled with anxiety from about the time I was 10. I then developed different coping strategies to help deal with that. Alcohol was a big one in my teenage years. At the age of 20, I started taking illicit drugs, and that became my kind of love affair, my number one coping mechanism for the next decade or so, where eventually that culminated in daily use and addiction to methamphetamine and GHB. I was very heavily addicted to these drugs, using them in high amounts every day, dealing drugs to support my habit, in trouble with the law, high-speed car chases, jail, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I was trying to deal with the unease I felt of being a human being in this world, which I thought I would have to deal with for the rest of my life. But fortunately, it's been, 8 years or so now since I dealt with a lot of my underlying trauma, and it's still an ongoing process. Like, this is a lifestyle. But after dealing with the big chunks in my own past and my own life, I was able to stop using drugs, stop feeling the anxiety that I felt for, I often describe this to clients, and I've heard other people put it this way as well. It's like this companion that's with you, and it's been with you for so long that you don't know what life's going to be like without it. And it's great to sort of not have that constant companion with me all the time now. And so life's very different now. I obviously run the Center for Healing. I'm very passionate about it. I live an amazing life with Melissa. We have a son, Tommy, who's 4.5 years old, who I love, my God, more than anything I thought I could love. So, life's very different than it was to me a decade ago. And that is in large part to me dealing with the trauma that I had in my system.
Yeah, I think it's so important what you guys have done and what you're doing. And I'm so happy to support this and happy to be a part of it. So many eye openers and incredible. It's just incredible. Also, you have been very successful with your healing work, and also you get amazing reviews from people who did the courses, and also the results they got. It's amazing, really. Okay, then there are myths and misconceptions about mental health and trauma. Would you like to give us the thoughts around this topic?
Trauma, we all give meaning to words, right? Words have different associations. And so, trauma has certain associations in the collective mind of most people. And I start to see that, shifting a little bit now. And a lot of people are open to the fact that they may have trauma. The way that we define it, and we all have to define words and what they mean, is that, trauma is a spectrum. It's part of the human experience. We don't get through this thing without having some level of trauma. And we all sit on a spectrum when it comes to that. And we're all holding a certain amount of that somatic stress, which is what trauma is, within our system, within our body and mind. And then that stress can then manifest in different ways. So sometimes I like to get people, and we're starting to experiment with this a little bit, is just change the language a little bit. One term that we use is undigested life experiences, because sometimes depending on the audience you're in front of, if I'm in front of 50 people and I'm like, who's got trauma from their childhood or their past, depending on the room, like 5 people might, cautiously put their hand up. But if I say, hey, who's got some undigested life experience, stuff that they still think about, even though it happened over a decade ago, if they start to think about it or it comes up in conversation, it gets them quite emotional and riled up, and you feel like you're experiencing that same anger or that same sadness that you did when you were 10 or 5 or 12, then if we're being honest, everybody in that room would put their hand up. And that's kind of what we're talking about when it comes to trauma. It's these imprints that are left on us from the past that we weren't able to properly process at the time. And because of that, we created some sort of adaptation in the way that we see the world and see ourselves and the way that we show up and act in certain situations. And that's now become destructive in our life to some extent. And there's so many examples of that. There can be, putting my hand up in class in grade 2 and getting completely shunned by all my classmates and the teacher and not having a safe space to speak about it at home. Then all of a sudden, 20 years later, I find it myself incapable to speak up and express my needs in a relationship or at work or in any environment. That's an imprint becoming active and affecting the way I show up in the world. Someone who's been sexually abused, when they were younger, can grow up and have really negative views towards men or towards similar people who abuse them. And it makes perfect sense, because trauma is a survival adaptation. It's a way for us to try and survive through certain painful experiences that we have. But in the main point, I guess I want to get across is, whilst they are a survival adaptation, and it's amazing that our system can do that, a lot of the work that we do is as we grow older and, we're now in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and we can't work out, why do I have these troubles in relationships? Why am I anxious all the time? Why do I keep having to turn to alcohol? Why can't I have difficult conversations with my partner or my boss? Then we start to go, okay, let's find out what the roots of that are. Let's find out where those fears and everything started. Then we're diving into people's trauma at that point. And just mental health as well. That was the other, words that you used. I think as a society, I've seen the last 5 or 10 years, people are waking up more and more to mental health, more people of authority, celebrities, sports players, and that are speaking about it, which is great. So there isn't an awareness out there, because, classically, like someone like my dad, or even me, like, in my, teens or 20s, we know that we have physical health. So, like, of course, we have mental health as well. We know if we don't look after our physical health, we're going to run into problems, whether it be, maybe it's not in the short term, but in the mid and long term, we definitely are. And we kind of understand that. So now I think more and more people are starting to understand, hey, I've got this mental health, this emotional health that maybe I've neglected for a very long time. And I'm going to need to put some time into seeing to that. And also not understanding that I'm never done. It's not like, if I start going to the gym, let's say I'm really overweight, I'm unhealthy, I'm having trouble breathing, all this stuff, and I start going to the gym and I eat better, and then all of a sudden I achieve what in my mind was the goal, then I don't go, all right, I'm done. I'm never working out again. I'm going back to eating junk food again. We understand that there's going to have to be some maintenance there. We're going to have to look after ourselves to some degree, maybe not as intensely to get us to that point, but we're going to have to maintain. And it's the exact same with our mental and emotional health. It's a lifestyle, not something that's, fixed and then it's okay for life.
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you for that. And in regard to your work and all these topics, what are your favorite authors and why?
So favorite authors, yeah. I was reading about 100 books a year for a while there. So I've read a lot. For me, the two, as you say that question, the two that jump out are Michael Singer and Don Miguel Ruiz. And I think that they're not specifically in the realm of, trauma work, trauma therapy, or that kind of thing. They're more, I suppose, spiritual teachers. But the thing that I like about them, and something that I tried my best to adopt when teaching, is to break things down into simple terms. They take very complicated topics and they put them very, very simply. Whereas you read it and you kind of know it, but you're like, I kind of already knew that, but I'm not living it because I think I made this particular area of my life more difficult than I needed it to be, right? And so I just love their ability to synthesize things down, make it really simple, Obviously, Michael Singer wrote The Untethered Soul, The Surrender Experiment, and Living Untethered's his new one. I actually love hearing him speak more than reading his books. So he's got some online courses and some lecture series that I love listening to. And then Don Miguel Ruiz. Most people would know him for The Four Agreements. I think The Mastery of Love is his best book. It is so brilliant and so greatly describes love and relationships, and also our relationship with ourselves.
I got these books from Melissa, and yeah, I love them totally. And same like you, I like simple speech.
It's really important because, especially when we get into the topic of mental health and we start talking about trauma and neuroscience and all, you know, the nervous system and all that, you can go really deep into the weeds. And the issue with that is most people will not want to go that deep into the weeds. They just want to understand like what has led them to be acting, or myself to be acting in this certain way. And the more simply we can explain that, the more people are going to be able to get that information. Okay, I've got what I need to now do the work and start to make change, as opposed to getting lost in the weeds of just more and more knowledge, information. It's
just
great.
In the head. If it's too much in the head, it must be practical. Yeah, it must. Yeah, very good. For who are the Center for Healing courses?
Those that want to go a bit deeper. You know, that's generally what we've found. You know, like a lot of people who come into our courses have some sort of background or they generally always have a lived experience of going through something, whether it be mental health issues, addictions, family addictions, or mental health issues. And they've done some degree of study, and that might be self-study, as in reading some books and taking some other courses. It may be, we have a lot of people from the counseling space, from the coaching space. And it's for those who are like, okay, this is all great, but I really want to, there's something missing. And it's this deeper piece of the puzzle. I've heard the word trauma now because it's becoming a bit of a buzz, and a lot more people are talking about it. And I truly want to understand it and get an idea of it, whether it be myself and for clients. So for those who want to go deeper, essentially, because we talk a lot about, and we don't, no, there's a place for everything. There's a place for talk therapy, classical psychology. There's a place for, you know, behavioral therapy and all that. That's just not what we do, because like I said at the start, we're trying to, that big blind spot that I see that a lot of healthcare has, we want to try and start in our way to best fill that blind spot and bring it to light.
So much for that. So, and I did hear you talking about win-win-win situations when working with you guys. So,
I read many years ago, it might have been even Stephen Covey's book, he spoke about just win-win. He goes, it's either win-win or nothing, you know, when trying to work something out. And for us right now, you know, the big, I suppose, win-win-win for what we're doing today is, you know, we get to deliver what we deliver, and we do that in a very passionate way from a place of experience of running the center, having our own stuff, all the study that we've done, all that. And so, you know, we get to sort of express our passion and creativity and get to make a living from that. Like I said, I get to now sit here with you and talk on a Tuesday morning, as opposed to being on a roof freezing my hands off. And the second win is now working so much with practitioners or people who are working in the space or stepping into that space. We hear more often than not, people say, oh God, this is like much more than I thought I was going to get. You know, or people will say, oh, I jumped into your course because maybe it was a stepping stone to another one, but I think I've got kind of more than I could bite off here. This is fantastic. So now these practitioners and people that we're working with, they're getting much more value than what they paid for. They're getting a great understanding of themselves, the way they interact with themselves and the people in their life. And now they've got the tools and the frameworks to be able to help the people that they work with. And so when someone posts in one of our groups, like our student communities, or maybe shares it on a support call, that they're like, oh my God, I worked with this guy and he was like so closed off. He wasn't even open to anything. And now I've been working for 4 weeks. He's completely different. He stopped drinking, and, you know, now he's reconciled his relationship with his partner. And so for me, that just gives me the most satisfaction, because now that's the win-win-win, because like, okay, we're delivering our passion and seeing the results and being rewarded for it. The person who's taken the course is getting more than they paid for, and they've got all these tools and frameworks. Now they're helping this person, but it goes even beyond that, because that guy that they're working with, I imagine they're like lights going on, right? So it's like the light just doesn't go on for him. because now that his partner, you know, his kids, the people around him in his life, they actually get affected, not just him, because he's starting to show up in a different way and be better in relationship to himself and other people. So I suppose that's the win-win-win that I most likely was talking about when you heard me say it.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah. So breaking the cycle of trauma, and yeah, it has this snowball effect then.
The only thing I would add to it is, you know, when we start to, break these cycles and these patterns, it not only is better for the people, for us and the people around us, but then we also got to think about these future generations that are coming as well. Because, you know, everyone listening or watching will know this, these family patterns just get passed on and passed on and passed on. It's like, oh, my dad was a drinker, my granddad was a drinker, you know, and these things get passed on. But as soon as we own this within ourselves and do the work to change it, then it's like we break that chain, you know, which is so vitally important. And that doesn't mean that our kids don't have challenges and issues and problems. They will and they should, but they should have different ones than the ones that we face. Because I think it's nothing sadder than, you know, 5 generations in a row all trying to overcome the same problem and sort of nothing's changing. So, you know, new problems for our kids. And I love it. Some people who get into this work with us as well, it's like they've already got kids and the kids might be, whatever, 10, you know, 12. And they're like, oh, I'm just learning this and I've made so many mistakes and blah, blah, blah. I can't believe what I've done. It's like, do you know what an inspiration you are to watch for a child to watch, you know, their mother or father, whoever it is, transform before their eyes. The positive programming and the negative programming that's undone in that process is incredible.
It's just so precious. For what kind of person is embodied processing? Yeah, for what kind of person is it beneficial, and in actually also in comparison to root cause therapy, because there is a difference.
Absolutely. So root cause therapy and embodied processing are our 2 main modalities that we teach at the Center for Healing. They have some similarities and many, many differences. That question's like super hard to answer. You know, I've been asked that question before. It's like us humans are all a bit different. We're all very much the same, but we all have a different nature, a different disposition. And so, you know, I've had many clients in the past who just for whatever reason, let's say embodied processing just didn't quite resonate, or it wasn't quite their time to do that yet, and root cause therapy has done really well, and then vice versa as well. So I always see them as kind of 2 different tools in the tool belt, which are very, very effective on their own. But, you know, anything in this world, one thing doesn't work for everyone. And so it's very, very important to know that as well. And it's like, if we don't have other tools in our tool belt to help the person in front of us, then we should refer them on to someone else, because at the end of the day, we're wanting to, like you said, make the world a better place. And that starts with getting the right results and the right treatment for that client in front of us. So it is a very, very hard question to answer. But with the embodied processing, you know, it's a somatic therapy. So we're getting people back into their bodies, because society is living up here. We're cognizing and interpreting life instead of living life and being completely in the moment, sitting in our bodies and having the experience that we're experiencing. And so, you know, sometimes people who are really cut off from that, they're just not ready to come back in there, because there's a reason why people get stuck up in the mind. Because as soon as I come down into my body, it's a very, very uncomfortable place to be, because I have a lifetime of stored stress, of trauma, of undigested life experiences just bubbling away that I've removed my awareness from by sitting up here. And so, you know, but that being said, you know, I've had clients who I'm like, oh, they're pretty closed off. I'm not sure this is going to be for them. And then an hour later, you know, they're having epiphanies and crying tears of gratitude. And so I can never pick, you know, I still can't, after all these years, I can't pick who's going to be great for it and who needs something else.
Okay, so that's why it's good to have more than one modality to help clients.
It's up to the person. I mean, if someone just wants the one and focus on that and go really deep with it, then that's also okay. But like I said, we just need to be aware that if someone's not getting the results or not being able to get into the therapy correctly, then we just refer them on. So it's important in that moment to, you know, have a little referral network of people that you know who are doing different things, who you know and trust, you know, they're doing it for the right reasons, who you can confidently then pass that client on to
the practitioner directory on your website. So, and there are so many people with different backgrounds are on there
Absolutely.
too.
I always tell people, like, when people ask about that and I send them the practitioner directory, I'm like, find like 3, people on there who you're like, oh, that sounds like the person I could work with, and then reach out to all 3 of them and just start a conversation, and then be open to, moving to someone else if you need to. Because I've seen so many people, we spoke about a lot of the misconceptions with, mental health, especially men, unfortunately, but it's happened with women as well, is that, we take so long to get to a vulnerable enough position that say, okay, I actually need to talk to someone and get some help, right? And then we do that. And then for whatever reason, the person that we end up in front of, we're just not vibing, and that's just the dynamic just isn't quite right for a healing to take place. And then people then go from that vulnerable spot to just closing back off and going, no, it's not for me. And you'll say, what's not for you? And they'll be like, therapy or talking to people. And you're like, well, that's a very broad subject there that you're closing off to, because there's so many different ways of healing and getting better, and then so many different people and personalities and energy within those individual areas. So it's very, very important that, if anyone's watching this and they've written off therapy or whatever, like, please don't. Like, please just try a different avenue and somewhat different.
But I think there's still partly this stigma that I'm mental when I take care of my mental health.
And it's a very it's been stigmatized for so long that even though things have changed a lot in 5 or 10 years, there's still a lot more changing to happen. It's like, trying to turn around, a giant ship or something. It can't just happen really quickly. It's going to take many years for that collective beliefs about it to change.
You helped a lot of different people with different issues. But could you specify what problems you can solve for clients with embodied processing?
There's a lot, because the way that we see it and the way that we work, so with embodied processing particularly, I used the word kind of stored stress earlier. And so what we're dealing with is the underlying stored stress within someone's soma, their body, their psyche. It's all kind of connected. So we want to get in there and start to, over time, number one, build someone's capacity to be with that stored stress in the body, and also work through the stored stress with them. Because when people come in, I use the analogy like scales. They have really high levels of stored stress in their system and a very low capacity to be able to deal with that. So, as soon as any inconvenience happens in life, they want to run away. And running away can look like, I need to, drink a bottle of wine every night. It can be like, I need to be around someone and be codependent on my partner. It can be using drugs. It can be, I have to keep working compulsively because I don't want to stop. Because if I stop, then I have to start dealing with all this stuff. And so we're kind of at this place when we come into this work. And so ideally over time, and everybody's different as to how long that process takes, we start to remove some of that stored stress and we try and deal with some of the bigger stuff early on. And at the same time, teach our clients how to build the capacity to be with it. Because that's what's so important. Because as soon as the scales tip this way for maybe the first time, then all of a sudden the client can have the resilience, the capacity within themselves to be with either things that are happening in their day-to-day life or things that are coming up from their past. And that's vitally important, because one thing we talk about in embodied processing is we don't like the idea of session reliance. We don't like the idea of, I'm going to have to be speaking to someone for years and years and years on end, otherwise my whole life's going to fall apart. We want people to have the tools and the confidence within themselves to deal with things. And also, if something big comes up they're having trouble being with, they can't be there for themselves emotionally, then okay, reach out and get an experienced hand guide you through that. But what we're doing is releasing that stress. And so the manifestation of that stress looks really different. Someone who's accumulated all this, I sometimes use the analogy of like we're born with an invisible backpack, right? Get the genealogical and collective stuff. That's a topic for another chat. But we're born with an empty backpack. And then we go through life and we grow up. And as we start to go through a very highly emotional experience, which we weren't able to deal with and didn't have a resourced adult to help us process, it's like we throw a rock in the backpack. Yeah. And so some of those rocks are like little pebbles, some are bigger, some are, quite large, and we're just throwing them in over a lifetime. And then naturally that backpack gets heavier and heavier and heavier the older we get. And, we might you know, speak to a good friend, have a really good chat, and we might, you know, do some yoga or something, and maybe some of the pebbles are coming out, but more is going in than's coming out. So that load's getting heavier. And then one day that load will get so heavy that it has to manifest some sort of symptom.
Yeah.
That can be depression. Don't want to get out of bed. I just have, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know how I ended up here, but, you know, I'm depressed. I'm anxious, you know, I'm both, I'm bipolar, you know, whatever it is, you know, I now have addictions. I'm leaning on alcohol, whatever it is, it will manifest. It can manifest in physical things as well. You know, the link between trauma and things like heart disease, cancer, obesity. If you look at the ACE study, that's ACE, adverse childhood experiences. There's a, you know, pretty much an irrefutable link between childhood trauma and a lot of these physical manifestations later in life as well. So those rocks, that stress will matter. Our life will show us, hey, there's something that needs to be looked at here, but we don't take the message that way. You know, we oftentimes, and this is not to poo-poo Western culture and medicine too much, because it does have its place, but we have very limited options about what to do when we get to that place. Yeah. And it's normally talk therapy and medication. That's it. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so one of the big passions that we have is we want to see a world in 10, 20, 30 years where when someone all of a sudden realizes they're in a depressed state and whatnot, then they have a whole menu of options, not just these two things here. They're on there, but they have a whole different menu of options of things that they can start to undertake and work through. Things like a somatic therapy will be one of them, movement therapy, group work, changing their diet and their lifestyle. Just, oh my God, what a massive neglected piece of the puzzle that is. So all of this kind of stuff is something that we want to see in the future. So, yeah. Sorry, back to the question. So the stored stress, I mean, we've worked with clients, I cannot describe the amount of different things that we've worked with. But if the roots of that thing showing up on the surface are stored stress within the body and the psyche and the subconscious mind, then we can work with it. And something like embodied processing can be helpful.
Thank you. Other somatic therapies out there, and what is different with yours?
Yeah, we got a bit of everything going on. The number one thing is obviously our client sessions, and where clients are the best teachers that we can have. And that's, you know, we spoke about obviously the practical part of anything is obviously so important. So myself and Matt, who co-created EP, you know, our clients and the discussions that myself and him have had around that and sessions done on each other, you know, that has been the number one. But then we've obviously taken inspiration from some of the pioneers in the industry. Probably the most popular somatic therapy out there is somatic experiencing by Peter Levine. And we love Peter. He's just such a pioneer. His books are just unbelievable. And we're very inspired by him. But then there's elements of internal family systems, you know, which is a lot of parts work, because we're welcoming in what we would call these orphaned parts of the psyches and welcoming them in to explore our experience of them, you know, within the body. Because as soon as we create a relationship with a part of ourselves, we can start to work with it as opposed to against it, which is what most people are doing. We have an adversarial relationship with the different parts of us, which is not the path to healing. You know, anxiety is a big one that most people are struggling with to some degree. Whenever anxiety comes up, we just want to go away, go away, go away. Not now. Don't get anxious now. You know, it's just, we want to abandon that part. And so we would invite that part in and start to understand that part, understand its qualities, understand what it has to say, its needs that weren't met, all of that kind of thing. And then we work with it as opposed to against it. Because as soon as people talk about, you know, self-love and I accept myself, like you can't accept yourself if you're abandoning the part of you that's anxious or depressed or hates that person or drinks. We've got to work with all of it in order to move forward in our life. So things like that, Nam, Lawrence Heller, you know, Gabor Mate's work, Bessel van der Kolk, all of these guys who, if people are, you know, in the industry, they would have heard the names. We've taken inspiration from a lot of different places. And a lot of the stuff as well, you find out later on, like we didn't come across some of these people until we were making EP, and it's so funny. I would read the books, and I've never read the book before or anything. And I'm like, oh, they've kind of come to the same conclusions that we've come to, but it's a little bit of a different way, like their own unique flavor and way of expressing it. So, yeah, the way I see it, there must be certain tenets that are kind of out there in the ether that different people have picked up on. But what we're trying to do is obviously bring a lot of those people into the one modality.
Yeah, we are learning all from each other and evolving from there. And yeah, it's an amazing process.
It's even evolved in the last couple of years, because we definitely would not have the arrogance to say, okay, we've done, this is embodied processing and that's it, it's done. It's like, no, we want the process to evolve over time as well. You know, it's very, very important, because that's, I've been in some other trainings as well. It's like, if you challenge part of it, then it's like you're just sort of kind of told to shut up and don't. That's what the curriculum is. Whereas, you know, we're open to that. It's like, okay, you challenge it. Let's have a discussion about it. Let's talk about it. Let's see what the greater community sees. And, you know, let's, if this thing needs to evolve, we trust that it's going to evolve in the right way because the right people are involved. And that's, I'm talking about our community that we have who are in the training.
Yeah. A really beautiful community. I love it totally. Okay, but also root cause therapy, Melissa is pointing out that learnings are important. What do we learn about ourselves? So during a session,
there's a similar kind of flow there, although it's not asked as directly. But with any of this type of work, any modality, there seems to be a common thing where it's like, we're kind of learning all the way. So first, we're learning about the origins, you know, of this particular part that we're working with. And that can oftentimes, you know, blow clients' minds in the first place, which is great, because when they, as soon as they experience something they didn't expect, they start to open up. Yeah. When we come into therapy, it's like, this, I'm talking to you, but this is what happened to me. I know why I am the way I am, even though I'm coming in to get help. So it's great when a client has an experience where it's like, okay, let's invite in the part of you that's angry at your partner because you keep arguing about the same thing, money or whatever. And then as we start to explore that part somatically, and we start to get to know what it feels like, where it is in the body, and we might ask, you know, who was the first person that helped made you feel that way? Or who was the first person that said that to you? Who's the first person that comes to mind when you think about this? And then all of a sudden, you know, they're back to when they were 6 years old with their dad or something, you know? And so it's great to see a client then, because that's the start of the learnings, right? It's like, oh, the thing that I'm upset about isn't the thing that I'm upset about.
yeah.
You know, it's not my part. It's just this particular energy of this conversation that goes on, and the reactivity and defensiveness comes from a place where I was trying to protect myself many, many years ago. And so there's kind of the first step, this awareness. Okay, now I understand either the origin of it or a deeper version. You know, there might be more to it. We don't know. But I at least understand this at a much deeper level around why I am the way that I am and why I say and do the things that I do. But then I have to actually work and process through a lot of the feelings that come up. So, you know, whether it was anger at the dad, or being scared of the dad, sadness that I felt like he didn't love me in that moment, that then needs to be worked through, because we have a memory with a strong emotion attached. We have to work through the emotion before we can see the memory with an objective eye. That's the learnings that you're talking about. Yeah, because if I'm looking at that memory, let's say, of me with my dad, I sort of made this one up as an example. But if I'm looking back at that memory, I can't see it objectively, because I'm looking through the glasses, the filter of the anger, the sadness, and the fear. I need to work through that before I can take the glasses off and see the whole totality of that experience. Okay. Balance it out, so to speak, because that's essentially filed away in the negative experience filing cabinet. That's, you know, lock and key somewhere. We want to pull it out and put it in more of a, you know, doesn't have to be a positive one, just a neutral one is much, much better than that. So there's always a processing phase. We have to work through the sensations and things that are coming up for us. And then the next phase is what you're getting at here is, okay, let's have a look at this now. Let's look at this whole situation, not just the one of you arguing with your partner about money, this event with your dad, all that's happened in between of you reacting similar situations like this. And more often than not, then the client will start to have some more aha moments and epiphanies, because they start to really understand that, oh my God, my dad was just doing his best. He had all his own money stuff and was getting defensive against the 6-year-old boy. That wasn't fair to me as a 6-year-old, but I understand where he's coming from now, right? And now you kind of connect the dots in your life and go, oh my God, no wonder I've never been able to talk about money without getting angry, you know, for the past 20 years. And it all starts to make sense. And then we need to obviously test what has happened in the session by saying, cool, until I see you next week, have a discussion with your partner about money and be very, very aware and notice what's happening in your body and mind. and there's no right or wrong. If you get angry again, that's perfectly fine. We can just work through some more layers next session, but we're creating just more awareness in the client, and they're understanding. It's like we call it a dual awareness. I'm aware of what's happening in the world and who, quote unquote, is pissing me off or making me sad, but I'm also very, very aware of what's happening inside of me at the same time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that's where clients start to really become very, very good the more they practice at having that awareness inside as well as outside in all of interactions. Because then we get to deal with what Singer would call, I'll bring him up again from before, the personal self, or people will call the ego. He goes, in any situation, deal with your personal self first, then deal with the situation. Because more often than not, you'll find out there's not much of a situation to deal with after you've dealt with the personal self, because that's what most people are dealing with in nearly every situation. They're just dealing with their personal self, either trying to protect it or make it right.
Yeah. So
one thing like me and Melissa do, this isn't a couples workshop, but one thing we try and do in any relationship, there's going to be arguments and conflict. Me and Mel, we're business partners as well. So we've got another layer added to it, And so
you manage well. That's cool.
We do our best. And so I used to see it with couples all the time, is you use the protection. I could see two couples arguing and it looks like they're arguing, but all I could see was both of them like trying to protect themselves. You know what I mean? And so one thing we do, if we're having a conflict and we've lost awareness a bit, then whoever picks it up first, so we might be arguing and getting more and more, defensive and whatnot. And then I'll just try and say, you know what, I'm scared. I'm scared and I'm trying to protect myself. And then 100% of the times, the other person will go, yeah, me too.
And the underlying issue so often.
And then the energy of the conversation changes and we can start to find some sort of resolution as opposed to continuing the spat.
Very beautiful. Thank you for that. That was very good. Okay, so then step deeper. Maybe you could call it a step deeper. What about the complex PTSD? This is there are so many levels to it, it's not always easy to sort it all and find the path out of it.
Yeah, so we would CPSD, the way we see it, and we're very passionate about this topic, is essentially developmental trauma. Okay, there are different types of trauma. The way we teach, there's acute trauma, which is what the classic idea of trauma is. So it's like, I've been sexually or physically abused. I've been in a car crash. I've been away at war and seen or done horrible things. Everyone goes, oh yeah, that's trauma. And it is, definitely. And then there's these other categories as well. There's collective trauma. We're all born into a collective soup, so to speak, and we pick up certain collective traumas. Think if you're born into, a Jew, then you pick up on a lot of Nazi Germany, that collective trauma. Germany itself has a big collective trauma. I've been there. It's still recovering all these years later. There's collective trauma. There's genealogical trauma, so things that are passed down in our genes from parents, grandparents, and the like. There's pre-conscious. So I'm going to lump these two in together for what you're talking about. Pre-conscious or precognitive trauma. These are generally things that happen before the age of 18 months to 2 years old. Before that time, the part of our brain that can recall memory hasn't formed yet. So we literally can't recall memory. However, our body, our nervous system remembers everything. So if we had a really difficult birth, that can show up later on in life with trauma symptoms. If we talk about this in the course, one of the saddest things ever, it wasn't until the 1980s that the medical field recognized that children under the age of 2 felt pain. And so if they ever needed some sort of surgery or procedure, they wouldn't give them painkillers. They would literally just give them a drug that would stop them from moving and numb them, but they could still feel pain. You talk about the definition of torture, like unbelievable. That was the 1980s. It wasn't that long ago. And so these things happen around that age that our body remembers. And then developmental trauma, which is kind of from that period through the development phase of our life. Some people would say it's the first 7, the first 11, whatever it is. It's these ongoing events that mightn't seem so catastrophic. And that this comes up so much, right? It's like, oh, but that wasn't a big deal. I know people that have had it worse, but maybe it was just feeling rejection from our mother or father over a 5-year period, constantly feeling rejection and told that I'm doing things wrong. It may be, you know, a period of all through primary school, I was bullied. Maybe I wasn't physically attacked or anything, but I was emotionally bullied through that whole period and felt like I was abandoned and like an outcast. You know, these things fall into a developmental trauma category, which is what we see as CPTSD. So post-traumatic stress disorder, they added a C on the front, which is complex, which means we don't know where it comes from, right? Because I don't have, you know, the veteran comes in and goes, oh, yeah, I served in Afghanistan and I saw A, B, and C, and now I can't sleep at night and I have flashbacks. So, okay, we can point our finger at what caused these symptoms. The CPSD is like, we're not really sure where it come from. So we just put the C at the front because it's complex. And then we kind of, you know, move on and give whatever medication they give. So for us, developmental trauma is a big passion. And like you said, it can be very difficult because oftentimes it's very subtle things over a 5-10 year period. So we call it like an unwinding. We have to really start to do a lot of digging work and find out what that was, what the relationships were. It's very much relational. So normally mum or dad, it can be siblings, can be other caregivers and whatnot, but it's very, very relational normally in that we felt the withdrawal of attachment or felt the withdrawal of love for a period of time. To an infant and to a kid, attachment equals survival. We'll sacrifice who we are and our natural expression as a human just to maintain attachment, because without mum and dad, we die. Simple as that. And so a lot of the work is starting to understand where those attachment wounds started and repairing those. And, you know, that can take, you know, quite a while, but it's definitely a journey worth taking, because as soon as we can unwind those things, then we start to see the benefits of these symptoms alleviating. I could not keep to 3 minutes on that one. There was no
No, it's super interesting. I was really looking forward asking you that. So
I think it'll add value. Like, so just an example, a client I worked with many years ago, and he was like in his 50s, very successful from the outside looking in. Internally, just stressed and angry all the time, right? And couldn't work out why. I was drinking to deal with it, but, you know, would always, you know, the go-getter and achieved, you know, and we traced it back, and, you know, it came down to, for his early years, he was just felt like a complete and utter disappointment to his father. And he was kind of made to feel that way. And there were certain events that led to that. And so his whole life, the biggest part of his identity was around an overcompensation of trying to impress his father, who was now dead, by the way. He wasn't even with us anymore. But that was the driving fuel. It's like, I'm going to show him that I'm worthwhile. I'm going to show him that I'm enough. So we're trying to make up for all these needs that weren't met and all these wounds that we had in childhood by overcompensating in areas of our life. And so it was very important for him. Once he understood that, he's like, oh my God, this has been the way I've lived my life for 40 years, you know? And it's like, it's sobering to realize that, but also it's freeing to know that, okay, I can start to work through this and make different choices now.
Yeah, very good. It's really life-saving. It's so life-changing. What do you think? Could embodied processing heal narcissists, psychopaths, or sociopaths?
Question.
Yeah, because it's a very important kind of. I don't think the world will ever change if there's not a solution, or not a preventive solution.
So that's, so the number, if someone said to me, how are we going to deal with the issue of narcissists, psychopaths, and sociopaths? The first thing I would say is it's going to require prevention and like a long-term approach. Obviously, with narcissism, you know, that sits on a spectrum as well. So it would maybe depend where that person, because people who are a bit lower on the spectrum, they'll have moments where they kind of see their narcissism and then they'll spring back into it. But it requires a complete admitting, you know, that I need help and need to look at this. And by their very nature, those three categories won't even consider that there could be anything wrong with them. So it's really hard, you know, it's really, really hard. The few people in this category who we've worked with, they haven't come of their own volition. It's kind of like, you know, I've been forced, like my partner's going to leave me and take the kids, you know, something like that. And that's not even, unless the person themselves is in, that's not really a great place to start change from, is that I'm being made to come in here. So in terms of prevention, we need to understand what produces these personality traits, these characteristics, And it's a real touchy subject because so many people have been on the receiving end of, domestic violence, emotional abuse, from a narcissist and that kind of thing. So it's a really touchy subject. I get it. But it's something that we are trying to explore and understand because, I'm bringing up Singer again. And he would do these talks, speak about spiritual stuff, concepts in front of these inmates who were, in for like murder, serial kills, all that. And he'd do these, talks about spiritual stuff and they all loved it. And he tells a story of one of them came up to him after one of them and he just goes, and this was a person who'd murdered multiple people. And he goes, you the only person I've ever heard who actually gets why I did, what I did, the fact that I felt completely and utterly dead inside based on what happened to me in childhood. And all I did was want to die every day. And the only moment I felt alive when I was planning to and carrying out the murder of someone. So then he goes, does that mean because we understand that, we should stop locking up murderers? Of course not. No, we should be locking up murderers. But it's on us to understand the conditions that create that person so that we can start to take the action steps to prevent that in future generations. So psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, we need to understand them much better so we can stop them being produced in future. What I've seen from narcissists is that there's an extremely low self-esteem and self-worth, which is then being like, my client, he wasn't a narcissist or anything, but there's this massive overcompensation that swings the other way. And then we get so lost in that overcompensation that we even lose we forget the fact that we had this low self-esteem and that we're compensating in the first place. So understanding things like this is very, very important. But in terms of working one-on-one, if someone's far down the line, they're not even going to want to come in, let alone get...
Yeah, no, I don't think they would. But...
You have to show them. So the term narcissist comes from the fable of Narcissus, I think, who went down to the lake, and there was a time where there was no mirrors or anything, and he sat down by the lake and he caught his reflection in the water and fell in love with it, and he became obsessed with his own reflection, right? And he ended up he ended up falling in the lake and drowning. But it's like, I'm obsessed with that image in the lake, but in order for me to change, I have to be shown a different image. A different mirror has to show me who I really am, and it's something that I'm not going to like looking at. And so I was like, you have to be open to looking at something you're not going to initially like looking at, and the narcissist will be very resistant to that.
Yeah, many people don't want to face themselves or their issues, not really.
So for those three categories, it's they're not even at that place yet because they won't even admit that there is an issue with them. It'll be everybody else around them that needs to work on themselves.
Yeah. So are you actually regretting what you went through your life with the knowledge you have today? I mean, it made you a really great person. Yeah?
Absolutely zero regrets in my life. So, that's right. I mean, people are like, oh, do you regret, the things that you did or, the things during addiction? I'm like, no, not at all. Like I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now, have the life that I have now. That's a bit of my nature and disposition as well. Some people have trouble making decisions. I don't, because once I'll think about something very carefully, but once I've made the decision, it's like, because people imagine if they make a decision, then two timelines exist. And then they can, and maybe they do in like a multiverse situation, but two timelines exist. And then from that point forward, I'm going to compare myself to the other timeline to try and work out if I'm doing okay and have made the right decision. So I just don't have that part of me in my brain. Once I go somewhere, the other timeline vanishes and it could never have been to me. So I just sort of make do with what I've done. But that's what most people do. They compare themselves to an imagined fantasy where they made a different decision. And normally they believe the other decision was going to be doing pretty well, when that in actual fact they have no idea, because the grass is always greener, right? If that expression comes into play there. Right.
I think that's a bit of a waste of energy, I believe.
Yeah, so people are like, there's some imaginary timeline where I wasn't a drug addict, but it's like that doesn't exist to me. I was, and I've done what I did, and I made the most of it from there.
Okay, yeah, good. So what would you tell your critics?
Let's have a chat. Let's talk. The main criticism we get, and this is just the internet, the way the internet works, is people who haven't taken any of our courses or interacted with us, and they see what we do. It might be an ad or a post or something, and they just want to attack for whatever reason. They're in a bad mood that day. It conflicts with their current belief system. Both of those things normally, and so that stuff worries me less. I'm not going to lie. It still gets to me a little bit, but much less than it used to. But if anybody any of our students that were in our courses, if anyone who I respected in the industry had a criticism, then I've done this with students before. If they've disagreed or had a query about a part of our course, I jump on a call with them. I'm like, cool, let's chat about it. Because the thing is, even though I've done this with some people in the past who weren't students, but I did respect them a bit. As soon as you jump on a call and talk for any more than 5 minutes, you realize you're both kind of on the same page. You're trying to get at the same thing. You just have a different way of expressing it, and you have far more in common than you don't. And so I like to nip that in the bud, because one thing I can't stand is that, and it seems to be tribalism and human nature. It's like we move in a certain direction. So people split off and go, I think healing is so goddamn important, dealing with your trauma, being able to work through that. Like, it's so important, and the world should know about this. And then as soon as that movement gets big enough, that movement splits off and starts attacking each other. It's like anything, veganism. So veganism becomes a thing, then it becomes so popular that one subset of vegans attacks the other subset of vegans, or carnivores, the opposite. And so it's just this human thing, and it comes down to tribalism from what I can tell and what I've researched. So I try and avoid that as much as I can by just not buying into it if it's from a source, like I said first, or if it is from one of our students or someone I respect, then I'm like, let's just talk about it. We should be having. So here's the thing, people listen to me and Matt and go, oh my God, you guys are on the same page or speaking the same language. It's like you've known each other for lifetimes. I might argue with Matt more than anyone. We have so many disagreements, but we work it out. We actually work through it. And normally from our disagreement, a new idea evolves, and that's very, very important that we have people in our life who we do disagree with and have conflicting views with, because that makes us both better.
Yeah, that's amazing. Really, congrats for that. That's really, humanity has hope now. Pioneers, we need pioneers. I mean, we have this very restricted view on things, and there is often many views on the same thing, and that's okay. So
no, you're exactly right. And what you're talking about now as well, being online, we can kind of find all these niches around the world of people who agree with us and see the world the same. And that's awesome on one hand. On the other hand, we get stuck in what's called an echo chamber, where it's all people with the same beliefs just talking at each other, and it's just rebounding. And then that really puts people off to hearing anything outside of their belief system, which is so sad, because that's where some of the beauty of life is interacting with people outside of our belief systems, and not having that turning into a match of who's right, who's wrong, and who can attack the other person better. Like, that stuff's just what is so wrong with the internet, to be honest.
Yeah, but that's what people, I don't know, is it a thing of ego or safety that they want these systems, like they really want to pack it in boxes and then protect these boxes somehow? I don't know. Is it? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. It's absolutely. The ego wants to protect and be right. So if someone says something that is challenging my beliefs, then my ego has to make them wrong, because if they're not wrong, then that means I have the possibility of being wrong, and the ego hates that more than nothing else. So it's into full protection mode.
Yeah, but it leads into a sort of death or not. I mean, it's just it just sets a stop to everything. I mean, we as evolving beings, we need challenges.
It's like, I live here in Melbourne, Australia. And then, if I go into the streets of Delhi in India and I start walking around, and I might see them cooking up dog meat on the side of the road, and I'd be terrified. I love dogs. The dogs are a sacred animal. I have a dog, and they're fantastic. And I would be horrified, and I'd want to go and, tell them they're wrong. If the person doing that was walking through the streets of Melbourne, they would see me eating a big beef steak, and the cow is sacred to them in their culture. And so he would be horrified, and he would point at me and tell me I'm wrong. And then what we normally do in interaction is that me and him sit there and we both just point at each other saying we're wrong until we get so annoyed that we walk off. Whereas if maybe we could sit there and have a discussion around, oh my God, how different are cultural beliefs? You know, what's the ethics of eating meat in the first place? How can we create cultural beliefs that are going to better all of us as humanity? Then all of a sudden we have a wonderful conversation coming from a place of conflicting beliefs. But most people, they can't do that because they just want to be right and make everybody else wrong.
What are your future goals in regards to educating the world?
You know, when we started the Center for Healing many years ago now, we wanted to change the way that society viewed mental health, addiction, and trauma. And so, you know, we are playing our role, you know, down here in Melbourne, Australia. Like, we have students all around the world now, which is amazing, but we are playing our part in that. And we are growing as an organization, as a company, which means we're reaching more people. And so, you know, we're kind of on track, you know, with what myself and Melissa set out to do all those years ago. And so for us, it's, you know, we're going to keep going. Like, Mel and I are we're pretty driven. That's never the problem. For me, I'll talk about me individually. Enjoying the journey is the big thing that I focus on. That's my goal, because I can set goals and achieve them, no worries. But my issue is, you know, enjoying the process. I have a hat. I normally wear it all the time. It says grateful on it. And people are like, oh, cool, grateful. I'm trying to remind myself, because I'm inherently ungrateful. Like, I have a life now that is just, I never thought it could be possible. No, especially when I was a drug addict, but even before then, I didn't think it was possible. And so I just try and enjoy the journey. I know that we're going to keep educating more and more people. We're going to grow our audience. We're going to grow, you know, create even more of a movement. I don't know the future might look like, you know, creating change at a government level, you know, many years in the future, all of that kind of stuff. I don't know what it'll look like. I just know that I'll be up for the challenge. But mainly for me, I just got to enjoy it. You know, I've got a son who's 4, and he's actually more important to me than all the work that we do in the business. He's been a great perspective. So my number one job is being a dad. My second is what we do with work, but enjoying the journeys, and he helps teach me that better than anyone.
Yeah, children are wonderful teachers.
I was trying to get him in the bath the other night. It was like after bath time, and he was drawing it out, and then he just had to go from like his bedroom to the bath, and he was just taking ages. And there's always this part of me that's like, come on, we're gonna get to the next thing and got to be on schedule and on time. And I'm like, Tommy, come on, you know, it's bath time. He's like, Dad, I'm just having fun. And I'm like, I just wanted to cry. I'm like, yeah, let's take as much time as we need. So those little reminders are great for me.
Beautiful. Yeah. And it's such a precious time. And believe me, it goes so fast. Enjoy, enjoy, enjoy. Just a little other question. Why are humans not ever grateful for things? Where is that coming from?
Some survival. So you got to think the vast majority of our evolution, we were in hunter-gatherer tribes where we were every day was literally like, okay, where are we going to get food? Where are we going to hunt? There's danger. There's going to be famine. Where are we going to get clean water? So like, if I was grateful, so grateful means that everything's okay in my life and my world.
Yeah, okay,
if everything's okay, then I'll just sit down and do nothing. Now, we have the luxury in the life that we live now where we can like take a week off and sit down and do nothing, and we'll be perfectly fine. Uber Eats, you know, Netflix, go play golf, whatever it is. But we didn't have that luxury for the majority of evolution. So we haven't caught up to a lot of the wiring that we have. So that's why I think gratitude takes a lot of, and that's a bit of a, you know, buzz thing now as well. It's like, you know, do your gratitude journal, be grateful. But, you know, we do have to consciously do it more often than not, because that old part of us is like, no, you got to go hunt, you got to go gather berries, you got to go find water.
Right, makes total sense. But while you were saying it, that yeah, it's that dangerous to be completely satisfied because you stop doing things.
Maybe for a little bit, but then it's like we still have this world that's very interesting to interact with. And so, you know, I heard the analogy once, I can't remember who it was, but it's like, because people are like, well, do I set goals and achieve them, or am I just okay with everything and then I do nothing, you know? But it's like, because people say that if I need to try and achieve something or set a goal, then it means I feel deficient as I am right now. But we don't have to do things in the world that comes from that energy in that place. And so this analogy was, you know, let's say you have a 3-year-old, my son's 4, right? So I was like, you got a 4-year-old son, tell me about him. It's Tommy. He's, this tall and he does all these things and whatnot. It's like, cool. So you reckon he's perfect? I'm like, yeah, he's perfect, a perfect little boy. He's great. He might, annoy me from time to time and do this, but he's perfect. It's like, would you change? If you could, would you change something about him right now? And I'm like, of course not. Wouldn't change anything about him, because then he wouldn't be him, right? They're like, okay, great. Well, I'm going to freeze him and he's going to stay forever. That's how he live his life as 4. And you're like, well, no, I don't want that. So why not? You just said he was perfect. He's like, yeah, he is perfect, but I want to grow up and have new experiences. I want him to, meet friends at school and learn things and study and go out in the world and then travel and then, who knows what else. And it's like, great. So you can actually see him as perfect, but also want him to interact with the world and have experiences as well. So can you do that for yourself? And so that's something I try and remind myself a lot. It's like, just because I am interacting in the world and doing things doesn't mean that I am doing it from a place of, I have to get this or do this. Otherwise, I won't feel like I'm enough.
Okay. Very interesting. Thank you.
People think that they're like, oh, if I'm just grateful, I'll sit and do nothing. But after a day, maybe 2, if you're a Buddha, you might be sitting at your kitchen table and a bird flies past and you're like, oh my God, I haven't seen a bird like that before. What kind of bird was that? And you might chase after it. You're back in the world now, right?
Yeah.
You're experiencing. There's always something going on.
Yeah, but I think it's also about balance, the internal resting kind of thing, and then the being active again. So a healthy balance. I mean, could look for everybody different, who knows, but
oh yeah, yin and yang, right? Yin and yang. Like we all have a nature. So my nature is very much yang, right? So that's why my path is learning how to yin, which means, taking time to rest, work in, go slower, all of that kind of thing. Bring up Matt again, and this is one reason me and Matt work well together. He's the opposite. He's very yin, so his path, so he's learning yang, because he neglects that side, So we all, like I said, we all have a different nature. So it's important to realize that.
So is there anything else you wanted always to say?
You're not broken. Even if you feel like you're broken, even if you are, reaching out and speaking to a therapist and all that kind of thing, it doesn't mean that you're broken. We've spoken a little bit about ego, in this chat. And it's like, if you look past the ego at who you really are, your true expression, people can call it your spirit, your soul, whatever. It's not broken. Okay. It's a light that's there ready to shine. And it may be covered up in certain areas right now. But I can assure you you're not. So if you can take that orientation, that's one thing people can't quite grasp, the fact that they're like, oh my God, it must be so much, better now, than when you were a drug addict. And it's like, I don't see even when I was a drug addict now as being a better person or not. I was doing something different, and that something different had different results, but I don't see myself as a better or worse human being now to then, even though everybody else would define me as a better human being. Because we're never broken, even when we're at our lowest and we're working on ourselves. So one of the things we try and teach is to really let go of that. We try and teach practitioners to let go of that. When someone comes in, doesn't matter what state they're in, if you can see them as not broken, then something in them will relax. Yeah, because we're so used in society to people judging us. And especially, you spoke about the stigma of mental health. We assume that not only our friends and family and co-workers, but the person I'm going to get help, we assume they're going to think I'm broken and are judging me, which is just not the case.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ryan. That was an amazing interview. Just to finish it quickly up, if anybody has interest in your courses, look up the Center for Healing.
The Center for Healing on Facebook, the Center for Healing on Instagram, for healing across all the platforms. But our website is normally the best place to start out.
Yeah, and the courses on special, they are really so affordable. It's just amazing, and all you get out of them. Thank you so much, Ryan.